Oh, hello there, and welcome to Phil Talking D20. So today's vid, another homebrew extravaganza. Today we're looking at the Armiger. What is the Armager, you ask? It is my custom-built archetype. So inspired by all the wonderful archetypes they put into the Advanced Player's Guide, I have taken it upon myself to create my own because it's fun and you can do that kind of thing. So have a go. Now I'm going to talk about how I went through the process of creating the Armager, as well as talking about a kind of a handful of abilities that I created for the archetype. And I'm also going to put a PDF of the full kind of completed document in the description below. So if you like the sound of it, or you want to kind of get, I suppose, a better handle on how you can create your own using the steps that I'm going to talk about, by all means, take a read through it and kind of pick it apart and look at how that could inspire and help you create your own archetypes for your own games. This doesn't just apply to games masters. Again, players, have a conversation with a GM if you've got a great idea, work in concert with them and come up with something cool and add it to your game. The creative options with Pathfinder 2 are brilliant. So don't sit on the fence and think, oh, I can't do it because I'm not a GM. Have a chat with your GM and kind of come up with some ideas and see what they'll let roll. And hopefully, they won't be mean and say no. But let's start by diving into what the Armager is. Now, from a nerdy and historical perspective, an Armiger is effectively an individual that is granted the right to bear arms and armour and wear some form of heraldry. So in real terms, you're looking at kind of a noble who takes a group of kind of non-professional combatants and through whatever reason decides that he wants to grant them the right to go semi-pro and grant them the right to Armiger. And that then enables them to essentially start buying equipment and acting in a more kind of militaristic fashion on his behalf and at his behest. However, in fantasy gaming terms, the Armiger has always been associated with being a kind of an armour master. And that is the route that I have taken myself. So, the little intro text that I put at the top. You are the master of armour, both its crafting and its use on the battlefield. Like the Bastion, you believe a strong defence is key to securing victory in battle. Plate, chain, or scale armour are a second skin for you due to your arduous training. Perhaps you are a master blacksmith who travels through war-torn reaches to bring your legendary armours to aid in securing victory, or an implacable wall against which enemies break themselves. Few know the mysterious origins of these warriors, these warrior artisans, but none forget them when they witness one's labours. Ooh, mysterious. So, as with all archetypes, it starts with a dedication, which you can choose at level 2 in this instance. And the traits for this are archetype and dedication, as you would expect. Again, taken straight from the mechanics of when I've read and looked at all the other archetypes. Some have higher kind of feat requirements or level requirements, things like that. But this one starts at level 2. So the prerequisites, you must already have medium armour proficiency and a strength of 14. That's very important because in Pathfinder 2, armour has kind of strength unlocks that basically mean to get the most out of the armour and reduce its penalties and get all the other benefits, a minimum strength score is required. So that's why that factors in. Benefit. You have dedicated much of your waking hours reading texts and tomes and training to get the most out of your suit of armour. You gain the heavy armour proficiency if you didn't already have it, and you gain the armoured block reaction. And then the caveat note at the end of all the level 2 dedications, you can't select another dedication feat until you have gained 2 other feats from the Armager archetype. That's a way of stopping people like effectively mega multiclassing and having 5 dedications but no clear path. Again, that's standard when you're looking at the archetype kind of builds. Now, what on earth is the armoured block reaction, I hear you say? So, this I created myself because I recently ran some homebrew games for me and my lad over lockdown, and we kit bashed out a 40k game using Pathfinder 2. And to make it feel a bit more sci-fi, I effectively said, oh look, you can use your armour like a shield block and have it absorb some damage like a shield to make the armour feel a bit more sci-fi and a bit more 40k, because in Warhammer 40,000, armour is very protective. You've got like Space Marines with kind of thick layers of ceramite, and it's always described as kind of, you know, blocking and absorbing and glancing really heavy blows, and that kind of feels more like damage reduction. So how did I build armoured block? It's essentially shield block. One of the easiest ways to be creative, but ensure that you're staying sensible and balanced, is to use pre-existing mechanics that the developers themselves have used and created and authorized and said they're happy with. And they're happy with shield block. We know they're happy with shield block. It's in the rules. So how does it work? Right, pretty straightforward. Armoured block, general feat, level 1, because although I've put it in here as the special ability, I've also made sure that if you really like armoured block, you can just lift this feat out and stick it in the general feat section of your games and make it available to all your players if you don't want to use the Armager, but you perhaps really like this rule. So it's a general feat, level 1, traits, reaction, because it's a reaction like shield block. Prerequisites, proficiency with the armour worn, that's important. Trigger, you are successfully struck by an attack from an opponent you are aware of. Pretty standard, much like shield block, because it is. Benefit, you attempt to absorb a blow with the more protective areas of your armour. Your armour prevents you from taking an amount of damage equal to the armour's hardness. You and the armour each take any remaining damage, possibly breaking or destroying the armour. That pretty much, as verbatim there, is copy-pasted out of the shield block reaction, word for word. But instead of the word shield, it's the word armour. Special. You cannot combine the hardness of a shield and armour in one reaction. I've already stopped you, cheese masters. There's no shield, armour, mega, super, I've got 50 million points of damage reduction because I've got shield and armour block, ha ha ha, DM. No. Bad cheesemonger. So that locks it out and balances it. It's either your armour or a shield. It's not both. Again, balance and sanity reigns. Now, examples of armour hardnesses. There's some brilliant and very easy to access rules for this. Shields on page 277, precious metal shields on page 586, and material rules on page 577. The long and the short of it is that 90% of the time, you're pretty much using the same stats for a shield as you are for armour, because of how, you know, they've mechanized that element of the rules for materials. It's very clear that's kind of, they built shields from the same rules that they considered thinking about armour and everything else in the world, like doors and chests and so forth. So it's super easy. So if you were wearing leather armour, for example, based on the rules, the core rules that they even state in the materials section, leather armour would have a hardness of 4, and then it has 16 hit points. Now, what I've done in this particular entry point here is I've allowed bonus hit points to be granted from the armour's resiliency rune. So effectively, it would be 16 if you've got a +1 resiliency rune on your armour. It'll be 16 + 1. So it's only ever going to get 3 additional hit points, but that might help, and that would also improve your break DC. But it was just a little flavour rule that I added, because I felt that if you're investing in these runes of protection and these runes of resiliency, those should start to factor into item hit points, especially if you're going to be putting it on the line and blocking damage with it. So if you were wearing scale or plate, effectively the metal armours, you would be looking at a hardness of 5 plus the item bonus for the armour's resiliency rune, and it has hit points equal to 20. And again, with that homebrew kind of element, again, plus the resiliency rune kind of bonus, so +1 or 2, depending on what rune you had. So that is literally armored block. You're using your physical armor in the same way that you would use a shield in the current rules. So it's not broken because the same mechanics bind it. If you are in a really tough fight and you keep blocking blows with a shield or your armor, inevitably what's going to happen? It's going to get broken, it's going to stop being usable. And that's an important balance mechanic. So I've extended that rule across to your armor. Now, that is your dedication feat. But then we move into extra feats, and there are many, because again, I wanted this to be a very fleshed out example, but I also wanted to make sure I was including lots of different examples of how you can build mechanics from a perspective of homebrewing so that people could get an idea of how they could do it themselves. Armoured Adaptation, level 4, archetype feat. Obviously, prerequisites, you have to have taken the Armager dedication. Benefit, you have spent many waking hours encased in armour, learning to adapt to its discomfort, as well as learning techniques to adjust its fitment through your study of its construction. Again, we're going down this multifaceted line. You're spending a lot of time training to be defensive and getting the most out of your armour in combat, but also learning how to craft and repair it. It's a constant, it is a dedication to the Armager way of life. So, you become trained in the crafting skill. If you're already trained in the crafting skill, select a skill of your choice. Consider Armager lore to know about the history and traditions of the Armager. Have fun with it, by the way. I don't know what the traditions of the Armagers are in your world. Have a chat with your GM, come up with some cool flavour, flav, and create some cool story. I'm not going to kind of tell you what they should be. Enjoy it and do what you want to do with it. That's the point of this class. Though I do suggest Armager lore. And then, additionally, select one group of medium armour, such as chain or plate. When you're looking at weapons and armour, you'll notice they have groups, and that defines them as a collection of items. So halberds and gusamis and poleaxes and those kind of weapons are all polearms. Anything that involves kind of leather and hide tend to be grouped in as leather. Again, the plate armors like half plate, full plate, and so forth are classified as plate, and that's what I'm referring to. You'll see it when you're looking at the armor table, which is on 275 of the core rulebook. By the way, I also put that little note in here because I'm useful like that. So what happens? You become trained in the crafting skill or another skill of your choice. You select one group of medium armour, such as chain or plate. So it's not a specific armour, it's the group type. This is the group you have spent the bulk of your time training in and wearing. You now gain the benefits of the comfort armour trait with that one group of medium armours. Now, when you look at padded and adventurer's clothing, you'll note they have a trait called comfort. What does that enable you to do? Sleep in armour without having to take it off. Yes. No more surprising the naked knight and forcing him to spend 5 minutes or 1,000,000 rounds putting his armour on. No, he can sleep in it because he's double-armed. And that's what this class is about. This class is about someone who has maybe not dedicated their life to the complete and utter mastering of the martial techniques for weapons, like a fighter, or maybe not dedicated their lives to the path of kind of arcane magic, like a wizard or a sorcerer, for example. You've dedicated your life to the art of armour. You are the Armager. So, very cool ability. Like that one a lot. Now, you can select that feat multiple times, each time selecting a different group of medium armour, should you wish. So again, that's quite a cool one. Another level 4 another level 4 archetype feat is called Armoured Artisan. Ooh. Again, it's an archetype feat. You have to have the Armiger dedication. You have to be trained in crafting. So you don't need the previous one to get this. if you've already picked it in your skills build when you were building your character. You just have to be trained in crafting. Benefit. Your studies of armour have included much research into its construction, as well as constant physical work to repair or construct armour. Whenever you roll a success on a crafting check to repair or create a suit of armour, you instead get a critical success. You also gain the quick repair skill feat. Cool, nice and easy. Now that, as an example of how did I come up with that feat at level 4 and make sure I wasn't being a maniac, is very straightforward. I looked through example archetypes and kind of picked my way through level 4 feats because I knew I wanted something like this, and I knew I'd seen some examples of things like this. And what did I find? Pirate. Look at the pirate archetype, look at its level 4 archetype called, I think it's called Rope Runner. You gain a climb speed of 15 feet on rigging and masts, and similar kind of setups to that. Obviously a bit of GM discretion being thrown in. And when you're balancing on ropes and rigging and masts and so forth, if you roll a success on an acrobatics check, you get a critical success. So that, as a mechanic, success equals critical success. They are already stating they are happy with that as a mechanic around the level 4 archetype feat level. Happy days. That's all you need to do. Just get a feel for what you want to do, look for examples and what kind of levels they kick in, and think, can I get away with that? Do I think that's what I want to do with what I'm trying to create? You've got to have a vision. You've got to have a vision for what you want to create. I can't give you that, but I can give you a way of steering that once you start trying to apply it. And again, it's not like we're going with Intimidate or something that would be perhaps more mechanically powerful in a session. We're going with something that's really getting into the kind of the character and the flavour of the archetype, which is being this person who can repair and create and work intensively with armour. Perhaps you're supporting a large military campaign, and you're doing a lot of your downtime repairing and kind of fixing armour from battles. And the DM is then able to kind of think, all right, well, he's making a lot of critical successes here. So perhaps I'm going to give this army an advantage in terms of their maintenance and upkeep. Their armour classes are going to be better going into fights because maybe the opponent doesn't have an Armager in their ranks. So maybe their armour is starting to get broken and damaged, and their armour classes are dropping because it's just a sustained engagement over maybe 3 or 4 days of prolonged pitched battle. Yeah. See, look at that. You've got these creative avenues. And as a GM, when you've got someone in front of you who's an Armager, you've got options. And that's not just not for Armager, that's all classes. Think like that. Think about how their actions are steering the odds in their favour. So, Armoured Artisan, again, another one I really like. Now, to make sure that it's not just all crafting all the time, the Armager also gains a level 4 feat, if they so wish, to go down a more combat-focused path, called Iron Wall Stance. So it's a stance. We've encountered stances in Monk, in Fighter, in a lot of the classes. And it's an action to essentially, gird yourself and ready yourself for a particular form of combat that you're going to go entering into. So, traits, archetype and stance. Prerequisites, Armiger and dedication. Action cost 1. So it's one of your 3, action economy points to use. Requirements, wearing medium or heavy armour. Benefit, you have learnt to use stance and your armour's weight to make you harder to budge. While in Iron Wall Stance, you gain a +4 status bonus to AC and a +2 circumstance bonus to any defence against being shoved or tripped. However, you have a dexterity modifier capped to your AC of +0, meaning you don't add your dexterity to your AC, and your speeds are all reduced by 5 feet. Well, that sounds very fiddly and technical, Phil. How on earth did you come up with that? Very simply, Monk and Dwarf. I think Dwarf, don't quote me on that. Mountain Stance, it's called. Again, verbatim, those rules that I've just read to you there are straight from Mountain Stance, except the Monk when they gain mountain stance, also gains a melee kind of attack type that does a d10 damage. But obviously, the Armiger, he's probably going to have weapons in his hands, and it's more about trying to get that flavour of someone who can really just hunker down and really maximise their armour's protective qualities and just become that, well, like in the description, that unbreakable wall of iron that an enemy kind of assaulting army just kind of breaks upon. How cool is that? And again, completely and utterly rules legal. And again, from a balance perspective, I've looked at where you can start getting access to, because that's like a level 1 monk feat, the mountain stance that's lifted from. So again, when you look through archetypes, at level 4, they're quite happy for you to be choosing level 1 or 2 class feats as options for classes when you're taking a class-based archetype. So again, balanced. Happy days. See, we've got these mechanics that we can discover and use to be creative ourselves. So that's another good example of how you can use existing rules to make sure you're not over-egging the pudding and giving someone like a 50 d20 attack at level 2, which would be very silly, wouldn't it? But also probably for a couple of sessions, really funny. Armoring rights. A level 4 one again, because I wanted to have a good spread. I mean, if you look at some of the archetypes in the Advanced Player's Guide, some of them are only like 4 or 5, 6 or 7 feats. You know, they're like literally like just a smattering. And I think that's a combination of they achieved what they wanted to achieve, because some of them are very simple concepts like Poisoner. And again, I think there's also that element of page count and time. And really, from the Advanced Player's Guide, I really got the vibe that they really just wanted to show off what you could do with kind of your creativity. Because again, there's plenty of reference, you know, in the Dungeon Master's Guide to, if you don't, you know, if you want to be creative with rules, don't use our rules verbatim. Use the ones you like, get rid of the ones you don't, and change the ones that you want to change to make your game, you know, how you want it. So armoring rights, nice and straightforward. You are adept at donning and removing armour, and can even don medium or heavy armour without assistance at surprising speed. This one is lifted from the original Pathfinder 1 Armiger, because it was such a simple mechanic, and obviously it's nice to reference kind of previous iterations of something, especially if you're recreating it. You can don and remove armour in 1/3 the normal time, and that's lifted straight from Pathfinder 1. Now that one probably isn't that useful. I'd say that was probably one of the lower powered ones, but I just wanted to throw it in there because it was a nice little flashback to the original Armiger of Pathfinder 1. And it was such a simple mechanic, it was just a no-brainer. We now move into level 6 dedication feats. So there's improved armoured adaptation. Effectively what this does is this enables you to apply the comfort trait that we got from the first one to a suit of heavy armour, but only for a number of nights rest consecutively equal to your constitution or strength modifier, whichever is the higher of the two. So you might only be able to maybe manage 3 nights rest in full plate before you start to then suffer the fatigued condition as normal. But then you could obviously choose to stop wearing the heavy plate and get a night's rest and then get the ability back. So that's a funky one. Again, balanced, because I think the concept of being able to just rest verbatim inside heavy armor is just pushing it too far. But being tough enough and hard enough to endure kind of maybe 2, 3, 4 nights back to back and still get up and give it the beans if you're really, really dedicated, sounds like something that humans can do. And if you don't believe that, watch SAS Are You Tough Enough over and over and over again until you realise how weak and squishy and soft you are compared to really, really crazy mental hard people like Special Forces. Other Special Forces are available, but none are as good as the SAS, just to clarify. If you disagree with that opinion, you're a fool, and the SAS will surely find you, much like Chuck Norris does. Although Chuck Norris is harder than the SAS, but when Chuck Norris does a push-up, he doesn't push himself up, he pushes the world down. Yeah, think about that. Power of Chuck Norris compels you. Protective Redoubt. Let's move on to another level 6 feat. Effectively, this is lifted from the shield tree, where you can use your shield block to protect an adjacent ally and essentially give them the benefit of your shield block reaction. And it's exactly the same, except you're using your armour, but for rules purposes, it's identical. It's just we're using our armour and all the risks to our armour that presents. Again, verbatim, rules of that ability, but our armour instead of a shield. Bolster armour. This is a good one. This is built from the Rage template as I suppose, a mechanical basis for what I looked at. No, it's not Rage, obviously, but what it's doing is you, as part of your daily preparations, so that hour that you have at the start of the day, you can bolster your armour. What does that mean? You can add 10 plus half your level temporary hit points to a suit of armour for the day. And at the end of the day, those temporary hit points are lost. And what that's enabling you to do is push your armour further, because instead of it saying, like when we were looking earlier, it may be only having 20 hit points, you can now say it's got 32 hit points because your level, well, actually no, it would be 33, wouldn't it? Because you'd add 10, and then if you were level 6, you'd add 3 extra hit points. So your armour suit would then have 33 temporary hit points for the purposes of approaching its break threshold. That's not extra damage reduction for you, don't forget. The hardness, it isn't increasing. We're just meaning that because you're an expert in armour, your armour is more durable. You're doing lots of repairs, and you're reinforcing areas of the armour that you're using more in combat, and it's kind of ablative, and it's giving you extra wear and tear that no other kind of crafter who had not dedicated themselves like you have to armour would know how to do. The artisan's art of the Armager. All that alliteration, goodness for you there. Now, that again, like I said, built from looking at the mechanics of things like Rage, because I already knew that Rage gave you temporary hit points. And I wanted to kind of find a way of kind of employing an element of how could someone who is really good at crafting and really good at knowing and working with armour bolster their armour and get more out of it. And that's how I did it. I looked at things that gave temporary hit points, and I adjusted to make it kind of fit. Nice little classic mechanic that you see a lot in a lot of abilities. This increases by 5 additional hit points for every increase in your crafting proficiency rank above trained, to a maximum of plus an additional 25 at legendary. So instead of being 10, because you're legendary in crafting, you've really invested in that skill, that total baseline plus half your level increases to reflect that and reward that investment in a particular skill. Again, you see that a lot when you're looking at abilities and so forth. So, don't be afraid to use those mechanics when you're doing something that involves a skill, because it's very common in the rules. Magecraft Artisan, another level 6 feat. Again, very much dedicated to the kind of the crafting path. You have expanded your studies into the world of magic to better develop your armor crafting techniques. You gain the Mending spell as an innate focus spell and gain a focus pool of 1 point. Again, you'll see these kind of feats all the time, so don't be afraid of them. You also gain the refocus activity. See page 300 of the core rulebook. The activity required for the 10-minute activity is either crafting or repairing armor. Again, perfectly rules standard. Again, a low-level spell, but very useful. Magically cast Mending, regenerate hit points for a suit of armor. You also count as having the magical crafting skill feat for the purposes of creating armor. Nice, very cool. So yeah, Magecraft Artisan. If you really want to get into kind of nerdy crafting goodness, it's all there for you. Now, we're reaching the final throws, and we're into level 8 feats now, because that was a level 6 one. Armoured Surge. Costs 1 action. It's level 8. You again have to have the Armager dedication feat as its requirements. You aren't fatigued as a requirement for when you can activate it. And again, this is built from a similar kind of mindset of the rage mechanic to kind of work out how to kind of structure this as a thing. That's where the you aren't fatigued comes from, and the 1 action cost comes from. It comes from rage. Your physical training and constant tinkering to get the perfect fit for mobility and load carrying enable you to unleash bouts of explosive speed and mobility. You gain a temporary 10-foot speed bonus. This bonus lasts for 1 minute or until the character falls unconscious, whichever comes first. Again, very much lifted from the mechanics of rage. You can't use this ability again for 1 minute. Again, much like rage. But I just like the idea of having someone that has been training and practicing in heavy kind of armor, building up extra kind of levels of explosive kind of muscle, where they're able to just really kind of push themselves forward at kind of sudden bouts of speed, because they're just so used to carrying extra weight, which is their body has adapted to and trained to. Yeah, it's a fun one. Armored Expertise, level 8 feat. This is useful, and one of the I suppose the avenues of this class, if you're not into the crafting or the combat styles side of things. If you're a class that isn't going to get improvements to their proficiency with medium and heavy armors, this is why this is built in. So Armored Expertise, you gain expert proficiency for medium and heavy armor. So this is 1 level after the paladin gets it, because they get it at level 7, but it's before fighter, who gets it at level 11. But again, if you're a fighter or a paladin and you've taken Armiger, you're not going to pick that because your class is going to give it to you for free. You're not having to spend a feat on it, it's free. This is an avenue for kind of non-armor based classes to get into armor if they really want to. If you really want to play a heavy armored, like hardcore combat wizard, this is the class for you when it comes to being a defensive bulwark in armor. So that's where that one kicks in. Another level 8 feat, Steel Wall Stance. So this is, again, absolutely cool rules lifted from the next tier of the Mountain Stance feat in the Monk Tree, which I think is a level 4 or 6 level feat. But again, absolutely verbatim rules lifted from a core accepted mechanic and slapped in, but called Steel Wall Stance. And again, its rules are exactly the same as that, so we know it's balanced, and it comes in at a high level anyway, which seems to be a kind of a balanced consideration for archetypes. So again, funky one, like that. Agile Redoubt, again, lifted from a core mechanic. But this time we're able to make a reaction to essentially armor block an adjacent ally who was within 15 feet of us. Which again, if you look at things like Champion and other classes, some of them do have reactions that enable them to make a 15-foot move. That's where it comes from. So if you really want to be like a bodyguard in like armor who puts his body on the line and his armor on the line to protect a target, there's a little path in there for you as well. And then we've got Armored Mastery and we've got Armored Legend, which are coming in at level 12 and level 16. And effectively what they're doing is they're taking our armor proficiency up to master and then legendary. But again, there's a prereq balance in here so that you can't just take the dedication and then only pick the armor progression ones, because what I've done is, although you technically get armored expertise later than the paladin, but you get it before the fighter, once we get down to Armored Mastery and Armored Legend, they're coming in a level before the champion. The reason for that is because the Armager is absolutely committed to armor and armor alone. And so the prerequisites are for Armoured Mastery, you have to have Armager Dedication, Armoured Expertise, and one other Armager feat. So you have to be investing in the class to prove that you're kind of going down a particular path, and that your character has theoretically, in fluff terms, clearly been committed to this particular path and lifestyle. And then again for Armoured Legend, you have to have Armager Dedication, Armoured Expertise, Armoured Mastery, and 2 other Armager feats on top of that before you can take Armoured Legend, to again prove from a fluff perspective that your character isn't just a cheesy cheesemonger who wants to have legendary AC in heavy armour. Which again is a rules mechanic, because like I said, Paladin can have it and Fighter can have it. So, why not your Wizard? Oh, you're a wizard, Harry, in Terminator armour. It's mildly surprising. So that is the Armiger. Like I said, full PDF version of the Armiger will be down below in the description. There'll be a nice little link to my Google Drive for you to pilfer the PDF for use in your games. Like I said, hopefully this has inspired you to get creative and get an idea about how you could create your own archetypes. I'd love to hear about them. Drop me a comment. Drop me a sub and a like, and stay tuned for the next one, because more homebrew is inbound, people. So yeah, have fun, take care, stay well, and I'll catch you on the next vid. Peace.